The door swung open, and there she stood. Alyssa. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow as if she had been through a storm. It wasn't the warm, caring face we had once known. No, this was something else. Something colder. And her presence, now more than ever, felt like the missing piece to an unsettling puzzle. Claire's face morphed into something unreadable. A mixture of recognition and something more dangerous flickered in her eyes. Her voice was steady, but the tension was palpable. "Alyssa, what are you doing here?" Alyssa's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, but the expression was forced, unnatural. "You think I didn't know?" she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped into the room, her eyes darting toward the man who had been controlling everything, the puppet master who had tried to manipulate us all. He stood frozen, clearly taken off guard by her unexpected arrival. "You've all been too blind," Alyssa continued, her gaze settling on Claire, then on us. "Did you really think Miracore was the only one? Did you think you were uncovering something that hadn't already been planned out from the start?" The man in the shadows stiffened, and his lips curled into a sneer. "You shouldn't have come back, Alyssa. You've just sealed your fate." But Alyssa wasn't afraid. She wasn't even fazed by his threat. She stepped further into the room, her eyes locked onto the monitors that had once displayed everything we needed to know about the mystery, the people who had disappeared, and the strange experiments conducted by Miracore. With a quick motion, she slammed her hand on the keyboard, pulling up a hidden set of files. "You don't understand," Alyssa said. "It's not just Claire. It's not just you. It's all of us. All of us have been replaced." She hit another button, and the screen flickered, revealing a series of images, dozens of faces, familiar faces, and yet they were all wrong. All of them had been marked with one word in red: replaced. We stared at the screen in disbelief. These weren't just strangers. These were people we knew, people we had trusted. There was Alyssa's former colleague, Michael. Then there was the detective we had spoken to earlier, Detective Mills. And even the old man at the diner, the one who had warned us about the safe house in the first place. Their faces stared back at us with hollow eyes. "No," we whispered, the realization creeping in. "They've been replaced?" Alyssa's expression softened for the first time since she entered. "Yes, all of them. This is what Miracore really does. This is what the experiment was all about. They're taking people with influence, people with power, and they replace them with copies. Perfect copies that no one can tell apart. No one except the ones they leave behind." Claire's eyes flicked back to the man, who was now visibly sweating, his cool facade crumbling. The truth was coming out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Claire's voice was low, barely audible, but it was a question she already knew the answer to. The man hesitated, his mouth working as if trying to form words that never came. Finally, he straightened, his features hardening into something almost predatory. "You still don't understand, do you? You're all pieces in a much bigger game. Miracore isn't just replacing people. It's creating the perfect society, a society that has no need for the old ways. No more chaos. No more flaws." Alyssa scoffed, her eyes flashing with fury. "You've never understood the meaning of humanity. You think you can control everything, everyone, but you can't control us." Suddenly, Claire moved, quick as a flash, and before the man could react, she had grabbed a small device from the table next to her. With one swift motion, she tossed it at the wall. The device sparked, crackled, and exploded in a burst of light, sending a shockwave through the room. The man was knocked off his feet, and the monitors flickered out. Everything went silent. The room was plunged into darkness. And then footsteps, soft, deliberate. A voice broke the silence, but it wasn't Alyssa's. It wasn't Claire's. It was ours. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually," we heard ourselves say, our voice echoing unervingly through the darkness. But the words weren't ours. The voice, the tone, everything about it felt off. We turned, but no one was there. The air was thick with an ominous feeling, as though the shadows were watching, waiting. "What's happening?" Claire whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and confusion. That's not us." And yet, there it was again, the voice. Our voice, but not ours. "You thought you could run from this. You thought you could escape. But you can't. Not when it's already inside you." Suddenly, the lights blinked back on, casting harsh, sterile light across the room. But it wasn't the same room we had entered. It wasn't the sterile, clinical space anymore. The walls were lined with pictures of us, of Claire, of Alyssa, of the people we had trusted. But there was one picture that stood out. It was the most chilling of them all. It was of us standing right there. But not how we looked now. It was a picture of us from years ago. We were younger, yes, but that wasn't the unsettling part. The unsettling part was the subtle differences. The small things that weren't quite right. The way our eyes didn't look quite like our own. "You've been one of them all along," Claire whispered. And it hit us. A wave of horror, of disbelief. We had been replaced. The realization crashed down on us like a wave. And in that moment, we knew what had been happening all along. The questions, the doubts, the missing pieces, all of it made sense now. They had been using us as a part of the experiment. They had been using us to get closer, to figure out exactly how to manipulate the system. But now it was too late. There was no escape. Not anymore. With a sudden, heart-stopping jolt, the door slammed shut behind us. The last voice we heard before everything went black was Alyssa's. Her voice trembling but filled with urgency. "It's already too late. You have to destroy it all, before it destroys you." And then, silence. The darkness that followed felt suffocating. Every breath seemed to echo louder, reverberating in the hollow silence of the room. We stood frozen, the reality of what had just transpired hanging heavily in the air. There were no comforting answers now. No easy solutions. Only questions. Claire's hands trembled, her fingers brushing against the cold steel of the table. "What do we do now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile moment we found ourselves in. Alyssa, her face pale but resolute, turned towards the door, her eyes narrowed. "We survive. That's the only thing left to do." But survival didn't come easy. Not when you didn't know who you were anymore. We all knew it, but none of us dared to say it out loud. We had been replaced. Our very sense of self had been shattered like fragile glass, and the reflection staring back at us in the mirror was foreign, distorted. And the worst part? We didn't know who had taken our place, or if we had ever been the real versions of ourselves to begin with. Alyssa's eyes met Claire's, and in that brief exchange, something passed between them. An unspoken understanding. A bond forged through mutual desperation. "We need to go back. Back to where it all started," Alyssa said firmly. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, pressing down on us. "Where it all started?" Claire repeated. "You mean the house? The one you escaped from?" Alyssa nodded. "The one where I thought I was safe. The one where I was safe. But it's not just a house. It's a place, a nexus. It's the key to everything." The revelation hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. We had spent so much time searching for the answers, combing through fragments of evidence, lost leads, and confusing witness statements. But it had been right in front of us the entire time. The safe house. "I don't understand." Claire's voice was strained, confused. "What do you mean, Alyssa? What could possibly be left to find there?" Alyssa's gaze flickered toward the door again. "Because that's where the truth lies. That's where they put us. Where they started the experiment." For a long moment, the room was quiet. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioning system. And then, without warning, the truth hit us like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about replacing people. It wasn't just about taking power. It was about control. About manipulating everything, every aspect of our lives, until we no longer knew who we were, who to trust, or who was really pulling the strings. "We need to go back to the house," Alyssa repeated, her voice colder now, more determined. "We can't let them win." And just like that, we were on the move again, racing against time, against the unknown forces that were closing in on us. The truth, once again, was slipping further away, but we couldn't stop. We had come too far. Hours later, at the old house, the house stood there, like a forgotten relic from the past. Its windows were dark, the door shut tight, and it felt as if it was waiting for us. But there was no welcoming warmth, no comfort to be found here. Only the heavy weight of memories that we weren't sure we had any right to claim anymore. Alyssa led the way, her footsteps steady as she walked up to the door. The others followed closely, but I could sense the tension between them. They were just as uncertain as I was about what we might find inside. What was hidden behind those walls? What had we missed? What had they erased from our memories? "This is it?" Alyssa whispered, her hand hovering over the handle, as if she was afraid to touch it, afraid to open that door and see what waited for us on the other side. But there was no going back now. She turned the knob, and with a creak, the door swung open. Inside, everything looked as we remembered it. Dark, empty, abandoned. But the sense of foreboding was palpable. The air was thick with dust, as though no one had been here in years. And yet there was something new, something strange. "Look!" Claire's voice cut through the silence. She was standing near the fireplace, her finger pointing toward a strange, metallic box that hadn't been there before. Alyssa's eyes widened as she stepped closer. "That wasn't here last time. We need to see what's inside." With shaking hands, Claire opened the box. Inside, there was a set of documents, crumpled and yellowed with age. But one piece of paper caught our attention. It was a photograph, faded but clear enough to make out the faces. Faces we recognized. There was Alyssa, there was Claire, and there was me. But it wasn't just a simple picture. No, it was something far more chilling. The photograph had been taken in the very room we were standing in, but what was more unsettling was the fact that the people in the photograph weren't just standing there. They were smiling, yes, but their smiles were too perfect, too rehearsed. And in the background, barely visible, was a figure in the shadows. Watching. It was the same figure we had seen earlier, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. The one who had orchestrated everything, the one we had never truly understood. "This is where it began," Alyssa said, her voice trembling now, her hand clutching the photo with a vice-like grip. "This is where they started controlling us." There was a long, agonizing silence as we processed what was before us. The photos, the strange box, the document detailing the early stages of the experiments. Everything was starting to make sense. It wasn't just about replacing people. It was about testing something far darker. The whole thing had been a grand experiment to see how easily lives could be erased, identities rewritten, and memories manipulated. "This is what they've been doing all along," Claire muttered. "Taking people, replacing them, and erasing everything. Rewriting the world." But there was something more, something we hadn't seen. As Alyssa flipped through the pages, she froze on one particular document. It was a list of names. Names we recognized. Names of people who were still out there. And then, there was the final entry. The name that shook us to our core. The name on the final entry was a revelation in itself. But the more we stared at it, the more it seemed to warp into something we couldn't fully comprehend. There was no denying it. The connection was undeniable. It was someone close to us. Someone we had known for years. And yet, the name didn't belong there. Couldn't. "We have to go," Alyssa snapped, her voice shaking with urgency. She shoved the photograph back into the box and closed it with a loud, almost deafening thud. "We can't stay here any longer. Not after this." Claire's eyes darted around the room, her face pale as she stepped back. "Who is that? Who's on the list?" Alyssa didn't answer at first. She was staring at the box, her hands clenched into fists. "We don't have time for explanations. We need to go. Now." But it was too late. The distant hum of an engine echoed through the empty house. At first it was subtle, barely perceptible, but then it grew louder. Closer. I could hear my heartbeat racing in my chest as I followed Alyssa's gaze toward the cracked window. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the headlights of a vehicle illuminating the front yard. And that was when I understood. We weren't alone anymore. "They've found us," Claire whispered, the words barely audible as she backed away toward the door. We had only seconds to react. No plan, no escape route, just the cold realization that we were cornered. "What now?" I managed to say, my throat tight with fear. Alyssa didn't hesitate. "We fight. We've been running for too long. We stop running now." With no further explanation, she turned and motioned for us to follow her down the dark hallway toward the back door. We moved quickly, but the sounds outside were growing closer. Footsteps, shouted commands, a team of people closing in on us. A cold sweat broke out across my back as the door creaked open. There was no turning back now. As we stepped outside into the thick fog of the night, the cold air felt like a slap to the face. My mind raced as I searched for an escape plan. Anything. The woods. There had to be a path through the woods. I didn't have time to explain. Without thinking, I grabbed Claire's arm and yanked her toward the treeline. Alyssa followed, her footsteps silent but purposeful behind us. We didn't speak. There was no time for words, only the pounding of our feet on the damp ground, the sound of our breath mingling with the wind. The vehicle's headlights were now fully visible behind us, but we couldn't afford to look back. We had to keep running. The trees swallowed us whole. Their gnarled branches hung low, scraping against our skin as we dashed through the forest, barely dodging the thick underbrush. There was no moonlight, only the dim glow of the car lights in the distance. Felt as though we were running blindly, but I knew we couldn't stop. We reached a clearing, a place I had never been before. Another safe house? Another dead end? I stumbled forward, my breath ragged as I looked around. There was nothing, just an open space between the trees. But as I turned, my eyes locked on the figure standing in the distance. It was him, the figure from the photograph. The one we had seen lurking in the shadows behind us, watching, always watching. And now he was here, a tall man, dressed in black, his face obscured by the darkened night. But there was something in his posture, something about the way he stood that sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Behind me, I heard the sound of footsteps in the dirt. More people, but they weren't close enough yet. They were still at the house, trying to find the way to us. But in that moment, the reality set in. We weren't being chased anymore. We were being herded. We were already surrounded. Alyssa was the first to speak. Her voice was low but firm. "You're with them, aren't you?" The figure tilted his head slightly, almost as if amused by the question. Then, slowly, he reached up to remove his hood. The face that was revealed was both familiar and terrifying. It was Nathaniel. My stomach dropped. My heart skipped a beat. This couldn't be real. Nathaniel? How could it be? Nathaniel had been one of the first people to vanish. The man who had been so central to our lives. The one who had shared in the early days of our investigations. He had been a colleague, a confidant, a friend. But there he was, standing in front of us, his eyes cold and emotionless. And in that moment, the pieces clicked into place. "He was never gone," Claire muttered, her voice barely audible. Alyssa stepped forward, her voice full of accusation. "You were always a part of this, weren't you, Nathaniel? You never left. You were one of them, one of the puppet masters." Nathaniel's lips twisted into a small, unsettling smile. "You think you understand what's happening here, but you have no idea, do you?" He spoke slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment. "None of you understand what you've stumbled into. None of you understand the scope of the game you're playing." He took a step forward, and for the first time his eyes flicked toward me. "Do you really think you were the ones being watched?" Nathaniel continued, his voice almost mocking. "No, you were the ones being controlled. All of you, from the very beginning. Controlled," I repeated, my voice trembling. "By who?" "By us," Nathaniel replied, his smile widening. "By the very people who you thought were your allies, the people you trusted. You were never meant to be free. You were never meant to uncover the truth." "Then why let us get this far?" Alyssa demanded. "Why let us find the safe house? Why lead us to the truth?" Nathaniel's eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and something far darker. Because it's always been about the final test. The final choice. You see, we were never trying to stop you. We wanted to see if you could figure it out on your own. If you could reach this point, make the right decision, and understand your place in the game. But we're not your game, Claire hissed. No? Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Then why are you still here? Still fighting? Still trying to make sense of it all? He was right. We had spent so long searching for the answers, thinking we were getting closer to freedom, when in fact we had been walking directly into their trap all along. The safe house, the experiments, the replacements. It had all been a carefully orchestrated test to see who would break, and who would make it to the final chapter. And now we were at the end. Nathaniel's gaze hardened. The question is, will you make the right choice? Will you play your part in this final act? The sound of the vehicle grew closer again. We were running out of time. Alyssa stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. We won't play your game, Nathaniel. And with that, the tension in the air reached its peak, and we had to make the decision that would determine everything. To be continued, the revelation left us more lost than ever. With the puppet master revealed, the question remains. Can we trust anyone anymore? Will we ever escape the web of control that's been woven around us? This isn't over. What's really at stake? And is there still hope for freedom? Stay tuned for the next chapter.